My daughter looked at me across the kitchen table and said, "Mom, I really think it would be better if you didn't come to the opening night." She was smiling when she said it. That was the part that stayed with me, the smile. The kind of smile people rehearse in the mirror before delivering bad news, hoping it will soften the landing. I smiled back the way mothers learn to do after 60 years of practice, the kind of smile that covers everything underneath. I said, "Okay, sweetheart, whatever you think is best." She looked relieved. That hurt more than anything else could have. What she didn't know was that her name wasn't on a single contract in that building. Not the lease. Not the equipment suppliers. Not the linen service or the food distributor or the small business loan she'd needed to make the whole thing possible. My name was on every single one. And I hadn't forgotten. But let me start from the beginning, because nothing about this happened overnight. I've worked in the cafeteria at Mercy General Hospital for 22 years. Before that, I cleaned houses on the weekends to make ends meet when my daughter was small. And I still pick up a cleaning job here and there when the bills stack up, which they do more than I'd like to admit. I raised her alone from the time she was 6, after her father decided that responsibility wasn't something he'd signed up for. I worked the early shift at the hospital, got her to school, picked her up, helped with homework, cooked dinner every night, and fell asleep on the couch more times than I can count because there was simply no energy left for anything else. She was worth every bit of it. That's what I told myself, and I meant it. She'd always loved food, always had. By the time she was 10, she was standing next to me at the stove, asking questions I didn't have answers to. By the time she was in high school, she was the one teaching me. She went to culinary school on a partial scholarship and a loan I co-signed because her credit history was essentially non-existent, and mine was, after years of careful management, just barely good enough. I remember the loan officer looking at my pay stubs and asking, "Are you sure about this?" And I said yes, without hesitating for a single second. She graduated and worked in restaurants for several years. Good ones, then better ones. She moved up the way talented people do when they refuse to stop. And somewhere along the way, she fell in love. Her boyfriend came from a different world. His family owned commercial real estate in the city. Several properties. The kind of low-key wealth that doesn't announce itself but is present in every detail. The car, the shoes, the easy way his father picked up every check without looking at the number first. They were kind to my daughter, as far as I could tell. I met them twice in 2 years, which should have told me something, but I told myself everyone was busy, and that wasn't unusual. When my daughter came to me in January and said she'd finally found a space, that she wanted to open her own restaurant, that this was the dream, and she was ready, I felt a joy in my chest so big it almost hurt. I hugged her for a long time. She explained the situation carefully, the way she always did when she needed something. The space was available, the landlord was reasonable, but the lease required a co-signer with documented income and a clean credit history. Her boyfriend's family wasn't willing to put their name on anything because of their own business structure. Something about liability, she said, and she needed someone she could trust. She needed me. I didn't hesitate. I said yes before she finished the sentence. Over the following weeks, I sat across from more desks than I care to remember. Commercial lease, equipment financing, small business loan with my name alongside hers as co-borrower, a linen service contract, a produce distributor agreement. Each time, I read what was in front of me, signed where they pointed, and drove home feeling proud in a way that's hard to describe. My daughter was building something, and I had helped make it possible. She named the restaurant Rosewood. It was a beautiful name. She showed me the logo on her phone. A simple branch with small leaves, and I told her it was perfect. She asked me what I thought of the menu concept, and I listened for 40 minutes while she talked about local sourcing and seasonal rotations and the specific way she wanted to handle the pasta. And I understood, maybe a third of it, and loved every word. Then things started to shift. So slowly. I almost didn't notice. The calls got shorter. When I asked about the build-out, she said things were moving fast, and she'd explain later. When I asked about the opening date, she said they were still finalizing. When I offered to help with anything, painting, cleaning, organizing, she said she had a team handling it. When I asked who was coming to the soft opening in March, she said it was just industry people and investors. Nothing I'd need to worry about. Nothing I'd need to worry about. I was co-signed on the lease for the space. My sister, who still lives 3 streets over and has known me for 63 years, called me on a Thursday evening in late March. Her voice had that careful tone that means she's about to say something she's been holding for a while. "Did you go to the soft opening last weekend?" she asked. I was standing in my kitchen making rice. "What's soft opening?" Silence. My daughter had a soft opening at Rosewood on Saturday. About 30 people. A food writer from the city paper was there, I think. There were photos on the restaurant's Instagram. The spoon I was holding went still over the pot. "She didn't tell me," I said. My sister didn't say anything for a moment. "Honey, I'm sure it was last minute," I said, not believing it at all. "She's been so busy." Charlotte was photographed with his mother. My sister said quietly. Standing behind the host, stand together. They both had aprons on, like they'd been there all evening. I turned the burner off and stood in my kitchen in the silence that follows when something you've been trying not to see becomes impossible to look away from. I called my daughter that night. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding slightly out of breath, slightly distracted. "Hey, Mom." "What's up? I heard you had a soft opening last weekend." A pause. Brief but present. "Yeah. It was really small. Just a few people to test the service flow, run through the menu. Nothing official. I would have loved to be there. I know. It was seriously so low-key. I didn't want to make it a thing. His mother was there." Another pause. Longer this time. She stopped by. "She's an investor, technically. It made sense for her to be there. She was photographed in an apron. Mom, it was casual. I'm on the lease," I said quietly. "I co-signed everything so you could open this restaurant, and you had an opening night and didn't call me." "It wasn't an opening night. It was a test run. Okay." I didn't know what else to say. I just would have liked to know. "I'm sorry. I'll make sure you're there for the real opening. I promise. It's in 6 weeks. First Saturday of May. You'll be there." She sounded sincere. She was my daughter, and I wanted to believe her. So I did. My neighbor, a retired school teacher who has lived next door since before my daughter started kindergarten, caught me in the driveway on a Tuesday afternoon in April. She had that look on her face, the one that precedes concern. "I wanted to check on you," she said. "Your daughter mentioned you've been dealing with some health things." I had a bag of groceries in each hand. I set them both down on the hood of my car. She said, "What?" "She ran into me at the pharmacy last week. Said you've been having some issues, that you've been tired, that she's been trying not to stress you with restaurant business." My neighbor patted my arm. "I just wanted to say, if you need anything, I'm right next door." "I'm not sick," I said. She looked confused. She said, "I work 40 hours a week. I cleaned a house last Saturday. I am not sick." I went inside, put the groceries away without unpacking them properly, and stood in my living room, surrounded by 20 years of photos of my daughter on the wall. I called her. She didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. I texted, "Call me." I just spoke to the neighbor. She called back 2 hours later, her voice immediately apologetic, which meant she already knew why I was calling. "I just didn't want her asking you 100 questions about the restaurant," she said. "She always wants every detail, and I knew you'd end up in the middle of it. So you told her I was sick." I said you'd been tired. "Why does it matter if she asks about the restaurant?" "I'm on the lease. I'm proud of what you're doing." "I know. She stopped. "Things have gotten complicated with the investors, and I didn't want there to be gossip. What kind of gossip? It's nothing. I'll explain later. I have to go. We're in the middle of prep. I sat with that conversation for a week. Something had shifted, and I couldn't name it yet. But I thought about the soft opening. I thought about his mother in the apron. I thought about my neighbor's careful face. I thought about the fact that in 2 years, I had been introduced to his family exactly twice. And both times it had been brief and polite in the way of something managed, rather than something welcome. My sister called me on a Sunday evening. She'd been to a neighborhood association meeting and run into a woman who knew his family socially. She asked about the new restaurant, my sister said. Said she'd heard about it from his parents. They're apparently very excited. That's nice. She said his mother mentioned that he comes from a real bootstrap story. That he dated a chef who grew up in difficult circumstances, and that he'd really supported her in building something of her own. My sister paused. She said his mother called it a gift to the community. That he'd connected her with the right investors and helped a young woman with no family backing achieve her dream. No family backing, I repeated. She said his mother mentioned that the chef's family situation was, and I'm quoting, complicated. That there wasn't much support from her side. The room was quiet around me. I'm on the lease, I said. I co-signed $100,000 of debt so she could open that restaurant. I know you did. She told them there's no family support. It sounds that way. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. Then I did something I hadn't thought to do in months, because I'd been trusting my daughter and hadn't imagined I'd need to. I pulled out the folder of documents I'd kept from every signing, the copies the lawyers and loan officers had given me, and I spread them across the kitchen table. My name was on everything. Every single page. Primary co-signer on the business loan, guarantor on the commercial lease, authorized party on the equipment financing agreement, contact and guarantor on the linen service contract. The produce distributor had my phone number as the emergency contact. I'd signed all of it. I remembered every pen, every desk, every moment of pride. I turned to the back of the folder and found a handwritten note I hadn't noticed before. Tucked between 2 documents. It was in my daughter's handwriting, on a scrap of notebook paper, and it was addressed to herself. More like a reminder than a letter. Get Mom's name off the lease renewal before October. Talk to Daniel about transitioning the loan guarantor to the LLC. Make sure the investors don't see the original contracts. The folder slid off the table. I caught it before it hit the floor. She had always planned to remove me. My name was temporary, a bridge from no credit to enough credit. I had been useful, and now I was something to be managed, and eventually erased. I called my sister. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to find out how deep this goes." Over the next week, I called each vendor and contract holder with the same message. I am Charlotte Webb. I am listed as the guarantor and primary contact on your agreement. I need to verify the current status of our contract. Each call took less than 10 minutes. Each one confirmed the same thing. My name was primary. My signature had been used for everything. I also called the bank and asked about the business loan status. The loan is current, the representative said. I need to verify that my contact information is still accurate on the account. It was. It was all still mine. I went to see a lawyer on a Wednesday morning, a small firm downtown that offered free consultations. She was about 40, methodical, and she listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Your name as guarantor means you have significant legal standing. You can contact these vendors and creditors as the listed party. You can also formally object to any changes to those contracts without your written consent." She planned to remove me without telling me. Based on what you've described, yes. But she hasn't done it yet. Which means right now, you have leverage. I don't want to destroy what she built. Then what do you want? I thought about my neighbor's careful face. I thought about the phrase "no family backing." I thought about the soft opening photograph of his mother in the apron, where I should have been standing. I want her to tell the truth about where she came from, about who helped her get here. Then let's talk about how to make that happen. I wrote my daughter an email that night. I read it 4 times before I sent it. I know about the note in the contract folder. I know you plan to remove my name from the lease and the loan without telling me. I know you've told his family that you had no family support. I know about the phrase complicated family situation. I have spoken to a lawyer as the listed guarantor on every contract associated with Rosewood. I have the legal right to place holds, request modifications, and in some cases, formally withdraw my guarantee with proper notice. I am not going to do any of that right now, but I need you to understand that I can. You have 1 week to tell the truth to his family about who I am, about what I signed, about where your restaurant actually came from. If you don't, I will reach out to each of those vendors and creditors myself. I will tell them what I know. I will do it calmly and factually, and it will complicate every business relationship you have. You are my daughter and I love you. That is why I'm giving you this choice. She called me 11 minutes later. Mom, you can't threaten me like this. I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. I've worked for years on this. The opening is in 3 weeks. I know. You worked hard and I'm proud of every bit of that. But you didn't do it alone. And you've been letting people believe you did. It's more complicated than you understand. Then explain it to me. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Smaller, more like the girl who used to call me from culinary school when she was scared. His family has ideas about things, she said, about who people are and where they come from. His father built everything himself, but he has certain expectations. He talks a lot about independence, about self-reliance, about not needing anyone to carry you, and you thought he wouldn't respect you if he knew I was on your lease. Silence. I thought he'd see it as a weakness, that I couldn't do it without my mother co-signing everything. Instead of seeing it as a mother believing in her daughter enough to put her name on $100,000 of debt, she didn't answer. 1 week, I said. Tell them the truth. She didn't call for 4 days. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner, sat at my kitchen table with the contract spread out in front of me, and waited. My sister called every evening. I told her nothing had changed. On the 5th day, my daughter called me. She sounded like she hadn't slept. I told Daniel, she said. He knows everything. What did he say? He was upset. He said I should have just told him from the beginning that his father had more respect for people who built things with help from their families than people who pretended to be something they weren't. Her voice cracked. He said his grandfather took a loan from his brother to open his first office. He said family help isn't weakness. Did you tell his parents? Not yet. I need more time. You have 2 days. Mom, his mother is going to think I've been lying to her face. You have been. I know. She was crying now. I know. I'm so sorry. I believe that you're sorry. I also need you to finish what you started. Tell his parents. Tell them before the opening. She called me the next evening. I told them, she said quietly. All of it. The lease, the loan, the cosign, everything. How did his mother react? She cried. She kept saying she wished she'd known, that she would have wanted to meet you properly, that she'd said things to people about you that she needed to take back. A long pause. His father didn't say much. He just asked for your name and phone number. Why? I don't know. He said he wanted to call you himself. His father called me the following morning. He had a calm, direct voice, the kind that comes from decades of knowing exactly what he wants to say. Miss Webb, he said, I want to apologize to you. You don't need to. I do. My wife and I made assumptions about your daughter's background based on what she told us. I talked about her as if she were self-made in a vacuum, which is a story I should have known better than to accept at face value. Why is that? A brief pause. Because it's the same story I told about myself for a long time. I left out the part where my father worked 3 jobs so I could stay in school. Left out the part where my aunt put her name on my first commercial loan because my credit was nothing. I was so determined to be seen as someone who'd done it alone that I edited out everyone who'd helped me. I sat down at the kitchen table. I'm not saying what your daughter did was right, he continued. She should have told us the truth, but I understand the shame that drives that kind of lying. And I want you to know that I don't think less of her for where she comes from. I think less of myself for creating an atmosphere where she thought she had to hide it. We talked for 20 minutes. By the end of it, I understood something I hadn't fully understood before. My daughter hadn't just been ashamed of me. She'd been afraid, genuinely afraid, that the truth would cost her the future she'd worked so hard to build. That fear had made her do something dishonest and cowardly. But the fear underneath it was real. Understanding that didn't erase the hurt, but it made the hurt easier to hold. The opening was on a Saturday evening in May. 3 days before it, I made a decision. I called the linen service and put a hold on the delivery. Not a cancellation. A hold, pending my written authorization. I called the produce distributor and asked them to delay the premium specialty order, the local microgreens, and the heirloom tomatoes she'd spent weeks sourcing until I confirmed in writing. The standard produce would still arrive, but the specialty items she'd built the opening menu around would not, unless I said so. I was not trying to destroy the opening. I was making sure everyone understood that I was real, that I was present, that I was not someone to be erased from a folder and forgotten. My daughter called me that Thursday, her voice tight. The linen service says you put a hold on the delivery. The produce distributor is waiting for your authorization. I know. Mom, the opening is in 2 days. I have 80 reservations. I know. Why are you doing this? Because your name wasn't on those contracts when we signed them. Mine was, and I need to know that you understand what that means. I do understand. I told you I was sorry. I told his family the truth. What else do you need? I need to know that when Saturday night comes and I walk through the front door of the restaurant you built with my name on the lease, you won't look relieved that I'm there. I need to know that when someone asks who I am, you'll tell them. Not that I'm a distant relative. Not that I'm your mother's friend. Not that I helped out with some paperwork. I need to know you'll say, this is my mother. She believed in me when no one else would, and I could not have done this without her. Silence on the other end of the line. Can you do that? I asked. Her voice, when it came, was quiet and clear. Yes, she said. I authorized the linen delivery that afternoon. I called the produce distributor the next morning. Saturday evening, my sister picked me up at 6. I wore the navy dress I'd bought 2 years ago for a dinner that got canceled and never reworn. I put on the earrings my mother had left me. I looked in the mirror for a long time. My sister said, "You look like someone who built something." I said, "I helped build something." She said, "That's the same thing." Rosewood was everything my daughter had described and more. The space was warm, lit with candles and Edison bulbs, the walls exposed brick. A bar along one side with bottles arranged like sculpture. The tables were full. 80 people dressed for a night that mattered, and the whole place smelled like something good was happening. My daughter met us at the door. She was in chef's whites with her hair back, and she looked like herself, the version of herself she'd been working toward since she was 10 years old, standing next to me at the stove. She hugged my sister first, then she turned to me. She took both my hands. "Mom," she said, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "I'm so glad you're here." His parents were standing just inside, near the host stand. His mother was a tall woman in a green dress, and she walked toward me with her hand already extended. "Miss Webb," she said, "I am so happy to finally meet you properly. Your daughter has told me everything about you. Everything." She said it with an emphasis that meant something, and I understood that she meant it. His father shook my hand with both of his. He didn't say much. He just nodded at me like something between us had already been settled, and I supposed it had. My daughter cooked that night. I sat at a table near the kitchen pass and watched dish after dish go out, each one plated with the precision of someone who had been preparing for this for a very long time. The room was loud and warm and full of something that felt like joy. Halfway through the evening, my daughter came out of the kitchen. She picked up a glass and asked for quiet. "I want to say something before the night goes any further," she said. The room settled, This restaurant exists because of a lot of people. My team, my investors, the neighborhood that's welcomed us. She looked at his parents, nodded once. Then she looked at me and my mother, who co-signed the lease, the loan, and every contract in this building, who has worked 2 jobs for as long as I can remember and never once complained about it. Who believed in this when it was still just a conversation at her kitchen table? Her voice was steady. I haven't always honored that the way I should have. I'm going to spend a long time making that right. But tonight, I want everyone in this room to know her name. She raised her glass. Charlotte Webb. My mother, Rosewood, would not exist without her. The room raised their glasses. My sister grabbed my hand under the table. I was not going to cry. I was 63 years old and I had not cried in a restaurant in 30 years, and I was absolutely not going to start. I cried. His father sat down next to me a little while later, while my sister was talking to a woman across the table. He had a glass of something dark in his hand, and he looked at the room with the particular satisfaction of someone who has built things and recognizes the moment when something new begins to hold. Your daughter is talented, he said. I know. She's also stubborn and overly proud, and terrible at asking for help. I laughed before I could stop myself. I know that too. Those are qualities I understand. He paused. I told her something last week that I want to say to you directly. The people who helped me build what I have weren't a weakness in my story. They were the story. My father, my aunt, the neighbor who let me use her fax machine for a year because I couldn't afford one. He looked at his glass. I was ashamed of how much I needed them for a long time. I wasted years on that shame. Don't let her waste years on hers. I don't intend to, I said. The lease on Rosewood came up for renewal in October. My daughter had her own credit history by then, established enough to stand without me. We went together to sign the new papers. She signed as the primary. I signed off as the departing guarantor. The lawyer passed the new documents across the desk, and my daughter looked at them for a long moment. Thank you, she said. Not to the lawyer. You did the work, I said. You made it possible. We went to dinner after, just the 2 of us. A small Italian place around the corner from her restaurant. She ordered wine, and I ordered water, and we sat across from each other for the first time in a long time without anything between us except the table. She asked about my job. She asked about my sister. She asked about the neighbor, whether she'd forgiven the story about my being tired, and I told her yes, that the neighbor had actually come to the soft opening I wasn't invited to and told me it was excellent. My daughter winced. I deserved that. You did. I'm going to keep deserving things from you for a long time. Yes? I said. You are. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. I want to tell you something, she said. When I was in culinary school, the most scared I ever wasn't during service or exams or any of that. The scariest night was the one where I called you at 2 a.m. because I thought I'd made a terrible mistake and I didn't know how to fix it. She paused. You talked to me for 2 hours. You never once told me I should quit. You just talked me through it until I could see the other side. I remember. I've been trying to forget where I came from, she said. Trying to be someone who didn't need that phone call at 2 a.m. And the thing is, that phone call is the only reason I'm here. That, and 1,000 other things you did that I never properly thanked you for. I didn't say anything for a while. Outside the window, the city was doing what cities do at night, moving and humming, and not particularly caring whether any of us were okay. You know what I want? I said finally. What? Sunday dinners. Proper ones. Not every week. I know you're busy, but regular. At my house, at your table. I don't care. Just the 2 of us, or more if you want. But regular. She nodded. Okay, and when someone asks about me, you tell them the truth. Not a version of it. The whole thing. That I worked at the hospital cafeteria and cleaned houses on weekends and raised you alone and co-signed everything because I believed in you. All of it. I will. Because that story, I said, is not something to be ashamed of. That story is the whole reason you can cook like that. She squeezed my hand. The Sunday dinners started the following week. They've continued since. Sometimes it's just us. Sometimes she brings her boyfriend and his mother joins us, which is strange and pleasant, in roughly equal measure. His mother brings wine. I make pot roast. We have figured out how to be in the same room without the shape of all the lies between us. My name is no longer on anything at Rosewood. The restaurant is entirely hers now, in every legal sense. The kitchen she runs, the menu she changes every season, the reviews that have started appearing in places I'd never heard of, all of it belongs to her. But if you go on a Saturday night and you ask your server who opened this place, who signed the first lease, who co-signed the loan that made the first month's rent possible, and if your server has been there long enough, they'll tell you. They'll say, "The chef's mother. She believed in it first. I never needed my name on the door. I never needed credit or applause or a seat at the table that anyone could see. I just needed to not be erased. I just needed to be real. I still work at the hospital. I still take a cleaning job on Saturdays sometimes when the bills stack up, which they do. I still live in the same house where I raised my daughter, where the porch steps creak and the kitchen window sticks every winter, and the water heater makes noises in the night. I walk differently now than I did a year ago. Not because anything about my circumstances has changed. Because I stopped carrying something that was never mine to carry. My daughter did something wrong, and then she did something brave. She stood in her own restaurant and told the truth about where she came from. That doesn't erase the months she spent lying, but it's the foundation of something real, and you can only build on real things. I know that. I've always known that. I just had to make sure she learned it too.